Welcome to Talent Titans, the podcast where we bring you entrepreneurs and leaders from the global staffing industry. I'm your host, Suki Sodi. Now let's jump right on in and welcome today's Titan. Hi, welcome back to another episode of Talent Titans. Today I have Bryan Wilson from StaffUpApp joining us. Bryan, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Suki. I'm glad to be here.
Brilliant. Do you want to tell people who you are?
Who am I? Other than the lead singer of the Beach Boys? Yes, that's usually the joke I get. I am the head of product strategy at StaffUp. So I lead kind of where our product is going, where it's at, working with our partners and our clients to really kind of shape the future of where the staffing industry is going through the software that we build. So the easiest way of putting it.
Amazing. And what I love about your background, you come from staffing, so you actually know what you're talking about.
I do. Yes, I have been in this industry. I stopped trying to count, but at least 25 years, maybe a little bit longer. Started as a sourcer back in the day and worked my way up. And, here I am today.
Amazing. Because our industry is being disrupted, period. And I see a lot of people trying to disrupt it, but they haven't worked in the industry or they don't have people that come from the industry. And I always find that's a really tough bridge. Before we jump into the questions, where the hell did the company name come from? You got to share that one because it StaffUpApp. Who came up with the name? How did that name come about?
Well, our founder, Rick Richard, who's the CEO of StaffUp, he came up with that name a long time ago. We've been doing this now for 7 years, a little bit more than that. So back then, StaffUp was really just an app that connected to your applicant tracking system, right? Just like a job board, not much more than that, right? So back then it was like, how do you kind of easily explain like what we do? Okay, we're for staffing and it's an app. And, how do you put that into a name? Like we've tried to like think of other names to make it better over the years. And it's like, that's kind of what described it. But it's obviously grown into much more than that. So maybe it's not the best name anymore. I don't know, but that's what we're going.
I guess it makes sense, right? It's an app, it's for staffing, and it helps us grow, right? So, okay, Let's dive straight in. Let's dive straight into my questions. Mobile first strategy to compete with good old job boards. Your experience with staffing platforms, like because you're at Job Adder prior to that, Parsley, speaks to the power of technology when it comes to reshaping our industry, the recruitment industry. With a heavy reliance on job boards, such as Indeed, how can staffing companies successfully pivot to a mobile first brand strategy? And how does a private label mobile app help drive the app downloads over your traditional job boards?
Right. If you want to keep paying Indeed for the rest of your life, by all means, stick with that strategy, right? But if you want to stop paying the largest staffing company in the world, your direct competitor, you need to kind of beat them at their own game, right? So the best way to do that is to see what Indeed themselves are doing to market Indeed, right? So Indeed doesn't post job boards on other job boards anymore. They are the job board. The way they grow is they have built mobile apps, both for their Indeed Flex and just their Indeed job board. You can Google this, but for Indeed, it's like 70 to 80% of all job searches are actually through either the mobile site or their mobile app, right? And the way they grow that is they advertise where people spend all their time, right? And I think anybody within a few seconds knows where we all spend our time. We're scrolling, right? So we're on Instagram, we're on X, we're on TikTok. So if you want to get in front of your audience, go where they are, right? And you don't want to pay to invest like, hey, I'm scrolling and I see a job ad for a VP of sales or whatever, right? You're scrolling and you see, oh, I see BoiseJobs.com or I see, manufacturing staffing company, whatever that is, right? So Indeed advertises their mobile app. So you download it. That's where the jobs are. You search and apply. So that's how you can build your brand via mobile, is by actually starting with the very first step. And that's getting a mobile app in the first place, right? Again, Indeed has a web-based job board. They also have a mobile app. Most candidates prefer the mobile app. So you can do the same thing. You have the jobs in your ATS, put it in a mobile app, advertise that app on these social platforms. People download your app. That's where they apply. And the benefit of that is once they have your app in the back of your pocket, you've got all sorts of ways to re-engage with these people as well. Versus if they leave your website, they're gone, you don't know who they are. Well, you can market to anonymous people once they've downloaded your app. So you get a whole additional benefit when you do that.
Yeah, that makes sense because if you think about it, a lot of the time we are on our mobile phones versus desktop, right? And you're sometimes just mindlessly scrolling, but the fact is we're on the mobile phones
Hmm.
and everybody has an app. Do you think that it tends to be the more, for lack of a better word, younger generation that wants the mobile app capabilities, or are you seeing it right across the board?
We see it pretty across the board. I mean, I think in general, older generations say that they don't get technology as much and that they won't use it. But then when you go over to your grandma's house, she's still scrolling on Instagram as well, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that is any more the case, right? Other than like the oldest of generations in our workforce that aren't working anymore
Yep.
anyway, mobile phones have taken over, right? You're much more likely to see an older generation worker on a phone than you are just sitting at their computer, mindlessly scrolling that way, right? So it's the new TV, right? So no, we haven't necessarily seen that there's a reluctance in older generations to use it by any means. That used to be the case like 3 or 4 years ago, but not anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of sit on that older generation side without saying how old I am. And I think you're right because everyone tries to get me to you go somewhere and say, download the app, download the app. I'm very hesitant. But if I want something, if I really, really want something, I'm going to download that app.
Mm.
Right.
And
So,
the important thing is once you download that app, how often do you actually delete it? Right? Very rarely, right? You just got
rarely.
this endless thing of apps, right?
Yep. It's true, though.
Yeah.
You're
So once they download your
absolutely
app, if
right.
you have a way to re-engage those people when it makes sense, you've got this new communication medium, push notifications that none of your competitors are using. It's not text, it's not email, it's push, which has an even higher open rate than those other types of communications.
You're right, because I don't go in there and say, like you clear out your inbox. I don't go in there with the apps and say, okay, I need to clear out my apps now, right? What haven't I used? You're right. They kind of just sit there. The only time they go is if I'm going from Apple to an Android or something, right? So then I have to
Sure.
think about it, but I go Apple to Apple. So they just move with me as my phone moves.
Right.
That makes sense. So I want to talk about efficiencies because as a staffing industry, there's a huge pressure on margins. We all know that.
Mm.
So owners, especially smaller staffing agencies, and I'm not saying large staffing agencies don't have the same pressure, but it's that pressure on margins, right? So tools such as StaffUp, they help the smaller agencies compete. How do you see automated human assistant platform staffing models addressing these inefficiencies in the delivery operation and improving things like time to fill?
Right. Well, I'd say a large percentage of what staffing agencies do day to day is that delivery side of the business, right? It's like you get this order, you've got a list of candidates in your database that are a good fit. Now it's on, right? So I'm searching the ATS, I'm building short lists, I'm sending out emails, I'm sending out text messages. I'm making sure they have all the proper credentials and qualifications for this role, and then I'm waiting to hear back, right? And candidates change their mind, and it's just like a dance that we do, right? And that's great. I mean, that's what staffing is. I think the difference between using a mobile app for this is a mobile app can do that stuff instantly, right? So staffing agencies that get in the habit of doing the right kind of intakes and classifying their talent correctly when they come in on the front end, once you get that order, that minutes, hours, days, weeks time to match the talent to the rec can go down to seconds. Because once that goes into the system, it can instantly notify the people that are one, available, two, not already on another assignment, and three, have all the qualifications and things that you need. So even without going and doing all this searching, the system says, great, I know this qualified talent pool. I know how to reach them. I'm putting out the tentacles, and you'll see within seconds you get people that says, I'm interested, I'm interested, and you can go from posting to fill in literally seconds.
Now, is it fair to say that if I run a staffing agency, temp or contracting, I'm going to see a much larger benefit than maybe somebody that's just pure direct hire? And I'm not talking about the branding part here because building your brand is building your brand, right? So I don't see
Mm-hmm.
any difference with that. It's equally important. But I guess what I'm thinking to myself is those people listening here, and some of them may be only doing direct hire. Is it fair to say that this having a mobile app for creating efficiencies and things like that isn't going to be as beneficial, if I can use that word, as if I run a temp agency? Because if I run a temp agency, contracting agency, I sometimes have a matter of hours to get
Mm-hmm.
that role covered, whereas direct hire, we have a little bit longer than that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say that, we actually kind of break this off into the 5 stages of mobile staffing success, right? And I would say that people that are doing like perm and long-term contract type roles, where you're looking for very, very highly specialized type people, you're probably not going to be using the like, delivery scheduling, side of what a mobile app can provide. Right. That side of the mobile app is much more geared towards like high volume. So temp
Okay.
per diem inside of like healthcare, dental, light industrial, hospitality, right? That's like the scheduling side of it.
Yep.
I think a mobile app in general is good for any type of firm if they, yeah, like you said, you want to establish your brand, reduce that job board ad spend. But it's almost like the websites were like in the 90s, right? It's like you got to have one to be relevant these days. But then there's different modules and things that you would use in a mobile app that differ depending on the type of agency that you run.
I think also, as you were speaking there, the thought going through my mind was candidate experience, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter whether it's a contract or a long-term direct hire. If that's the way the candidates are going, then by not having a mobile phone strategy, you're almost behind everybody. You've got to catch up.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And especially with the younger, and I know we clarified the generational thing, but I know with my kids, I'll say, hey, I need this. And they'll sit there and say, ordered it. Obviously, they use dad's Amazon account. They don't use their account, right?
Right. But they got on the app and they ordered
There you go. And they've done it.
it.
Or
Yeah.
I'll be like, okay, so I'm thinking of this and well, no, you shouldn't do that. And they do that without leaving the house.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think that's really important for us to mention today because it is the candidate experience. Even if, you could say, well, they don't have to leave the house to apply to a job for us. They do because they have to leave the sofa and go and find their laptop. Right? So
Right.
it's just, I guess what I'm saying is in this day and age, the easier we can make it for candidates to find us, apply, and the seamless as possible that process can be. It'll never be 100% perfect because we deal with people
Sure.
on
Yeah.
all sides, the client, the candidate, the recruiter. Mistakes get made, right? So getting those efficiencies where we can. Now, I know we talked about people can apply. Do mobile apps tend to help with the candidate experience from the point of view where they've downloaded your app, they've seen it wherever they've seen it, not necessarily looking for a job, maybe they're passive, but they did download it for whatever reason? Does having a mobile app, do you really need a strategy for that? Or is that just, what, if you're doing all the other things, you've got your passive candidate covered as well?
Mm. Do you mean is like a specific strategy on how to best implement the mobile
Yeah.
app, or I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. How to best implement it if all you want to do is target passive candidates.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, again, I think of it from like the context of your brand, right? It's like, okay, top of funnel resource, right? Let's get those candidates into the funnel, right? Once those candidates are in the funnel, using like targeted messaging and like automation to like re-engage them, right? So a lot of our clients that are using the mobile app, it's not just a job board, right? It's a place to house their referral program. It's a place to house their help desk. So if there's ever questions, people can chat back and forth, right? It's an area to put your chat bots if it's after hours and you still want to be able to engage with them. But one thing is like smart notifications or like content calendars, right? So once a week, we want to target anonymous users, people that have downloaded our app and might be searching for jobs, but haven't filled out a profile or maybe haven't applied yet, right? So once a week, let's target those anonymous users to say, hey, there's new jobs that match you in this area, right? Brings them back to the app, right? When we
Perfect. Yeah.
first let somebody come into the app, ask them what their interests are, right? Are they interested in these kind of industries, these types of jobs, so that when new jobs are entered into your ATS, they automatically notify those candidates of those matching jobs, brings them back in. Let's once every 2 weeks automatically remind people that there's a referral program so we can up our referral program. So there's a lot of ways to nurture candidates, even when you don't know who they are, these anonymous users, just by them downloading that app.
Amazing. Okay, so 2024 for the industry, generalizing, I know there's some exceptions. It was an okay year. Wasn't great. For some people, it was a terrible year. So something I'm hearing a lot, both on my placement and coaching side, is people are very mindful of cost right now. So I want to talk about consolidating tech for cost efficiencies. As somebody who's led the development of these various staffing platforms, what do you think is the biggest advantage of consolidating a tech stack and moving from a quote unquote rented to your own an owned solution? How does this shift reduce human and technology operating expenses for staffing companies?
Our connection broke up there a little bit, but I think you were talking about consolidating tech, how that helps. Is that
Yep.
correct, Suki?
Yep.
Sorry.
Yep. So, and really just, and also the difference between going and, for lack of a better word, renting and someone else's app, you're using someone else's brand name and things like that, versus just investing in your own. And I don't, let me be clear here, I'm talking white label. I'm not suggesting anybody that's listening to this that they now need to go out and hire a development team. But how does that help reduce the costs?
Well, it kind of depends on, if you're just talking about a general market app or if you're using this as like a complete staffing operating system. So, when we look at the market, people that are using mobile apps, there's what I call like traditional agencies that are using your brand name ATSs, right? And they just want to like up that candidate experience. So they want to add on a way to engage with candidates via mobile that sets them apart from other agencies. But they're still kind of working within the context of that ATS. So in this case, you're like adding versus taking away, I guess, but you're putting the experience under one experience, right? So a good example is you might have a mobile app and you're only using that for advertising jobs, but you can also use it for getting referrals. We integrate with companies like staffing referrals. A lot of companies use staffing referrals, but they want to provide that through like a mobile optimized interface, right? Same thing with various chatbots out there and those kind of things. So it's about consolidating the candidate experience. And then there's the client side as well, right? Which we could talk about as well, but it's consolidating that experience. So that's what we would call as like our ATS integrations. Then we have other clients that are really looking at like, okay, how do I completely rethink how staffing works? These are the ones that kind of see what's happening with the pressures on gig platforms, and they want to start operating more like gig platforms. So in that case, we call it a staffing OS. You don't necessarily need an ATS because everything's rethunk. So in that case, it does your onboarding, it does your referrals, it does your ATS stuff all in one platform, which can save a bunch of costs. So kind of depends on where you're at as an agency and what your philosophy is. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but
Yeah. But you got to look, because let's be honest, you turn LinkedIn, you go and log into LinkedIn, other things you've got this, like today alone, I think I've had about 8 or 9 outreaches from various technologies for our industry. And it can be overwhelming. And I was one of these people, you'd go, okay, so you're talking to someone, they're like, I can help you with this. So I'll subscribe or buy this, and then the next one, and the next one. And the next thing you know, you've got all this stuff, but you're not even using it, and you're paying a lot of money. So I was kind of so I want to be able to address somebody listening to this who is thinking of getting a mobile strategy. They're sitting there saying, oh, but I've got all these other bits and pieces. This is going to be overwhelming and expensive.
Well, I'd say for the smaller or the medium-sized type agencies, these new mobile platforms out there can be your entire tech stack for the most part, right? That's the way that they're being designed. There's other players in the market as well, to where it can stand alone, where you don't necessarily also need an applicant tracking system, right?
Oh, wow.
So it can like serve that purpose. That's why we call it a staffing operating system, because it's like for a new age of staffing agencies, right? But it also depends on how, so if you're a small or medium-sized company, I think a staffing platform can go in and essentially replace that entire tech stack while also adding the things that make a staffing platform unique, a mobile app unique. That's that client and candidate engagement piece, right? So to replace your tech stack, maybe if you're small or medium. For a bigger company, you've got CRM, you got all these other things that kind of come into play. And in that case, it's not as much about hey, am I spending a little bit extra more per month? It's about, am I retaining and engaging the audience that I'm working with in the right way?
Yeah, that completely makes sense. So, which brings me in nicely to my next question. There is so much noise in the market, right?
Mm.
So it's a crowded market. So, like any other market, you've got to be able to differentiate yourself. How can staffing agencies leverage technology and innovation to stand out rather than, and, sorry, let me back up a second. So, to stand out, and how does owning your platform rather than relying on your traditional ATS, as you were saying, play a role in improving market valuation? So now I'm thinking of that client, that listener who is thinking, you know what, I need an exit strategy for my business in a couple of years. I want to automate. How does this help?
One big trend that I'm seeing that I don't see a lot of people talking about and that I'm really taking to heart is that we're all in this market, and every market for that matter, we're all just inundated and buried with these never-ending SaaS subscription fees, right?
Yep.
And a lot of staffing firm owners right now, their valuations are based on those operational expenses, right? And so they're just always adding more and more and more expenses on top of that. For the companies that are serious about this, and we're working with a few now, we think you should own your software. We think that software is moving at such a rapid pace right now that even the established players, all this software is going to get so much more personalized and it's so much easier to build, right? So probably the fastest growing division of our company right now is what we call enterprise solutions. And it's actually working with companies to take the foundation of what's already been built and saying, hey, we're going to give you the IP, right? And then we're going to
Okay.
help you build your own internal development engineering teams that we help you manage. But you're going to own it. So there's no ATS company saying, no, you can't have that. No, you can't do that. So the way you differentiate yourself is to be different fundamentally, right? And not have to ask somebody for permission. Now, obviously not every staffing agency in the world can do this, but the ones that can, the ones that own that IP, one, their OpEx is down because of the technology investment is lower. Two, the OpEx is down because you can actually do a lot more with less just busy work in between.
Yep.
And that's an asset that sells along with the business, not a liability.
Yeah, no, that completely makes sense. And you were talking earlier about the gig economy. The gig economy is growing at 18%, which presents a major challenge for your traditional staffing businesses. With your experience at the likes of JobAdder, Parsley, how are staffing companies combining the best of both staffing and the gig platforms to successfully compete?
Mm. This is really, really interesting because the message that I'm trying to get across to the market is that I think people have this idea that like gig platforms are different than staffing, when my argument is no, they're just the evolution of staffing, and traditional staffing hasn't caught up yet. They haven't kind of connected that. I mean, some have for sure, right? And certain industries are further ahead than others. But gig is staffing. It's just the evolution of that using tech, right? But the interesting thing about these gig platforms is they've come up trying to build this like tech only approach, right? You don't need humans in the middle. Technology can handle all of it. Well, guess what? Humans are humans. They still need to make these connections, right?
Yep.
So you're actually seeing the gig platforms now backtracking and trying to act a little bit more like traditional staffing. Because in the beginning, they get all these people that are interested, but then the employers are like, well, I don't know who to reach out to. I don't have a Suki that I know that knows me and knows what I need. They love the technology. They love being able to log in, enter an order, see it filled in real time. They love that part. But when they have questions, they want to talk to a human, right? So I think staffing knows that human part, and that's what staffing will always be good at. That's why I don't think I have to worry about AI, but you do need that technology piece. Healthcare and dental know this way better than other industries. Like most staffing companies already know what I'm saying, but all the industries, this technology is coming for you as well. So yeah, they're gigs becoming staffing and staffing's becoming gig, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think you really that was really well said. But just think about it like this. When you have a problem, you want to talk to a human. You want to be able to pick up the phone and call and say, hey. You don't want to be now dial one, now do this, now do all that automation stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're a people, we are a people business. We're not a software business. Staffing is a people business. And if once you get rid of that human element of it, I think you're in trouble. Let's be honest, because then you're replaceable as well.
Yep.
Because if technology, now, will that happen? in the future? I have no idea, but certainly ain't going to happen in our lifetime.
Right. And I full-heartedly agree with that. Even when I wake up in the morning stressed about all the AI stuff that I'm reading, you know what I mean? At the end of the day, I'm very, very thankful for being in this business because, yeah, that's never going to replace it. I think that I hope that all this technology is simply making it so we have more human connections and more interactions. I know sometimes it doesn't feel like that, but if you look at
Yep.
the silver linings, I think that's where it's actually taking us, right? So if that's true, yeah, we're all going to have mobile apps where we can communicate with clients and candidates in our internal team. We're all going to have AI, but hopefully that is driving towards this place where that means that we're just having more real human connections every single day, because that other stuff we don't need to be doing is falls to the background, right?
Well, exactly, because I look at it like this, that stuff that we don't want to do, that mundane, repetitive stuff, let automation, let it do that part. So then that means the piece where you're working closest to the dollar is when you're talking to your candidates, you're talking to your clients.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the piece I don't think we should be outsourcing to any technology. Because as
Yep.
soon as you lose that human contact, I mean, just think of it in the context of negotiating an offer for your candidate. Any AI is not going to know the nuances the way we do as human beings when you're having that
Right.
human conversation. Yes, maybe it can get close and give ideas and things like that, but I just don't see, certainly in my lifetime, I don't see it replacing. So I always say to my clients, look, use technology for lack of a better word, that mundane, repetitive stuff that you don't, the candidate doesn't even want to talk to you about. The rest, you got to keep that human piece going.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
talking about candidate, we slightly touched on it earlier. I want to just unpack the candidate experience through a mobile app a little bit more. You've been at the forefront of improving the candidate experience through various tech solutions. How can staffing companies transform their candidate journey by integrating every step, brand discovery, onboarding, even getting people paid, into a
Mm-hmm.
seamless process? We touched on it slightly earlier, but I want to unpack that one a little bit more because for me, this is the game changer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at the way traditional staffing has done it in the past, right? First we had like paper applications we fill out. And I'm talking right now kind of about like high volume staffing, especially, right? But
Yep.
you come to the office, you fill out an application, you go into the system, we'll call you when there's jobs that are available. That evolved to being maybe like a web-based form or what have you, right? But there's like all this kind of like friction before you actually even get started with the process, right? So like removing that friction in the beginning, I think is very, very important. Being able to just like find someone's brand, the local staffing agency, download it, quickly get into the system without having to jump through those hoops, but then kind of turbo taxing that onboarding experience, right? Make it much more simple for them. So it's about having one thing front to back, that everything your agency does is in that one thing, right? Versus I go to the website to fill out my application, then I go to this paychecks portal to log in for my pay details. Then I get the separate login to go to this onboarding solution where I log in all my onboarding stuff. And then the agency sends me a mobile app that I download that does my timesheets. And then I have another solution where I go and I get my pay data, right? Like think about consolidating all of that into a single candidate experience. So I find your brand, I apply, I onboard, I have a help desk. I can communicate with people right through the app. I can track my referrals. I can find assignments that I'm open for. I can get paid, view my pay history in that app, and I can redeploy. I can find new assignments for myself without the agency even reaching out once my current assignment is ending. It's like building it all around in that single experience, that single login versus these disjointed spaces, I guess, right?
Yeah. So let me ask you this. I think I know the answer to this one. Most people, especially when I'm speaking to smaller staffing agencies where they're dealing with day labor, light industrial, they seem to feel that their candidates don't even want a mobile strategy. I think that's not true.
Mm.
I personally think that is not true. But what has been your experience about light industrial, general staffing, day labor, candidates adopting that mobile strategy?
Mm. Well, I think if you just ask a candidate, do you want a mobile strategy? Like they don't know what that means. They're not going to, say yes or no, or, even know what that means, right? I think what candidates, specifically workers, specifically like in the industry you just mentioned, like light industrial, they just want flexibility, right? They want to be treated like white collar workers in the same way, right? Traditional light industrial is saying, hey, we've got a point system. You come in, if you don't show up, you're going to get these points deducted and then you're fired, right? Well, blue collar workers, they have emergencies, they've got kids. So it's less about specifically a mobile app versus what's the best way to build a flexible workforce into the DNA of our company, right? If the goal is 100% staffed on the production line every single day, is the best way to hard line with people saying, if you don't do what we tell you to do, you're going to get fired and good luck? Or is the best way to say, hey, we're going to staff at 120, 150% and make this flexible so people can drop shifts, people can fill in for others, and we reach that 100% capacity. So I think, if you ask workers, they're not going to say mobile, they're going to say, I want flexibility. And then your next question is, well, what's the best way to deliver flexibility? If we're letting people drop shifts, we don't want to hire 10 more recruiters just to pick up the phone and recall everybody. We want them to be able to press a button. As soon as they do, it notifies the 5 other people waiting in the wings to fill that shift. And that's how we achieve 100% fill rates for our clients. And that's how we retrieve super, super happy workers, because they're being treated like humans in 2025 should be treated.
Wow, you just said something and I just went, bingo. I can't remember the exact language you used, but it was blue collar workers want to be treated the same, have the same experience as their white collar. And just the thought of attempt 3 strikes and you're out. It's just such a different mindset. But you're right, because people still want to be treated like humans. And yeah, going to somebody who necessarily doesn't think tech and things like that and saying, do you want a mobile app strategy? Would that help? Is very different from, I think
Right.
you said, flexibility, right? So I guess it becomes, how are you phrasing it and using terminology that's right for your sector?
Yeah. I think light industrial, like per diem staffing, they've already caught on to this trend. Travel staffing, locum tenens, they're all kind of getting there already because the clients are putting the pressure on. They're saying, hey, if you don't have a way for me to, log an order and track the status and fill these on my own, we're not talking, right? Light industrial is the next big opportunity here, because the companies I see succeeding in the market, the staffing agencies that are really growing, are partnering with their clients to build flexible workforces, right? So if I'm partnering with ABC Manufacturing or whatever, it's really about achieving those fill rates, and you can only do that with happy workers these days. And the younger the generation gets, the more they're going to demand just kind of respect and flexibility in their work, and I think that's how you achieve it.
And this is a great segue into my final question, because I do want to make sure we cover the client side. So, so those hiring managers that are listening to this, what I'm seeing is from the client side, they want their life made easier as well. Again, I'm going to stick with light industrial because it just makes the conversation easier.
Sure.
A hiring manager who's working the night shift, for argument's sake, he doesn't want to have to, well, the office is closed, or I'm going to send an email, wait for a reply. They want to be able to log in and just give feedback, put their orders in for tomorrow. Even, we had John Smith on site today, great candidate, want to extend, all of those kind of things that normally they'd have to wait till somebody comes into the office, reads the email, replies. So you've lost a lot of time. So I can see,
Right.
so we've been talking a lot about the candidate side and the candidate experience, but it applies to the clients just as much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So if you're a client working in a high paced, manufacturing facility, right? And the one thing that you need to make sure happens every day is that you have all those positions on the production line filled, right? Your greatest fear is coming in the morning and seeing that 3 people are missing. And how do you get those 3 people, right? And just like you said, it would be an email or a text message, or probably both, to your staffing agency that you're partnered with. John said he's not coming today, and the staffing agency maybe or maybe not being aware of it, and then scrambling and sending text messages and emails, and this is all done back and forth. manually, right?
That's assuming it's not an early shift and the agency aren't asleep.
Exactly. So what if you had a system that did that for you automatically, right? Instead, the worker says, I can't make it today, whatever that's called, drop shift, or I can't make it, or whatever. And when they do, yes, it notifies and let the people know, but it also automatically tells those other 5, 10, 20 people that are qualified, hey, a shift just opened up. Do you want to grab it? Because the opposite is true with these workers too. They want more hours, right? Just because they couldn't come in early on Tuesday because their daughter had an issue doesn't mean they don't want 40 hours for the week. So boom, they accept it. They get scheduled. They show up. The client sees a nice little dashboard that just tells them who's coming and who's not coming and updates them in real time when they've clocked in, who's on break, who's clocked out, right? That's so much more efficient than 20 million emails back and forth and all the stress that can be caused otherwise.
100%. And if your recruiter or your day-to-day contact is on day off that day, well, then you're in trouble, right? So I get it. I think there's this fear around adopting technology. If we're being really honest, especially with the smaller agencies, there is this fear. And the only way to overcome that fear is to start having these conversations. Start having these conversations. And even if you don't know where to start with a conversation with somebody that can help. Like we're talking mobile strategies here. Okay, so if you want to explore that, start by having a conversation with you. Reach out to me. I can put you in touch with people. But I think what we both totally agree on and have said here is if you don't have a solution, a mobile solution, your competitors do, and they're ahead of the game. So on that note, how does somebody get in touch with you and talk to you about this?
Well, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, just Bryan M. Wilson. And then probably our website, StaffUpApp.com, where there's a bunch of information and blogs and all that kind of stuff.
Amazing. Now, with the Canadian Staffing Summit happening April the 3rd, you're going to be here. So what about those people? I
can't wait.
Yeah, that's going to be a good one. So now we've got people who are listening to this and they're like, you know what? I want to sit down and talk to him. How can they get time on your diary that week?
Send me an email, Bryan@StaffUpApp.com. I spell my name with a Y. We can either just schedule something or, meet up for a coffee or something like that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, a lot of the relationships I have start with a conversation, and 6 months, 8 months later, that's when we find okay, we're going to make this thing happen, right? So It is just about seeing what's possible and understanding how that affects the market.
And knowing, and sometimes you don't know what you don't know. Right? So somebody listeners could be like, yeah, I absolutely need to get a mobile strategy, but that's all they know. They don't know what's important, what's not important. And that's where speaking to somebody like yourself, you can help them figure that strategy out. Right? Or as minimum, give them things to think about. And you know what? It's funny because you and I have we've been talking technology and we're ending on, no, you've got to have that human conversation. Right?
Hey, I love that.
And I think that's just the perfect note to end on. Bryan, thank you ever so much for your time. I will see you in Toronto, April the 2nd, 3rd.
I can't wait. Thanks for having me on, Suki. Right. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks for your time. Take care.
Okay. Yep. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of Talent Titans, brought to you by Recruitment Professional Forum, where they're building a grassroots community for professionals and leaders in the recruitment industry to collaborate, advocate, and advance the profession. If you liked or were inspired by what you heard, make sure to follow, subscribe, and even leave a review. It lets more talented recruiters like you find the show. Until next time, keep on being a talent titan.